Hi, this is Tom Salemi from OIS-TV. I'm very, very happy to be here with David Pyott, the former CEO of Allergan and the new recipient of the OIS Industry Award. Thanks for showing up today and for giving a nice talk up on stage.
Great, pleasure.
And you've we'll get into the Allergan time in a bit, but you've got sort of a new addition to your resume. You're always reinventing yourself. You're now sort of a startup CEO kind of investor. Could you tell us a bit about the early stage opportunities you're working in?
Yeah, I mean, once you're no longer a full-time CEO, the life is yours, the world is your oyster, and I'm involved in companies with as few as 5 employees, a little startup in Irvine called Bionis Therapeutics, which has nothing to do with ophthalmology, all the way through to Royal Philips in Holland with almost 80,000 employees and, now 120 years of history.
I could see the familiarity of being with the Philips, and you know the trend. But with the startups, you hadn't done a startup before. I guess Allergan would probably be your smallest company that you're involved with, and we know what happened with that. What do you find appealing about the startup opportunities, and what have you learned from getting involved?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not in an executive role.
Sure.
That's something I've, despite all temptations, avoided.
You will be though, right?
I won't
matter
be
of
a
time.
CEO
Never?
again.
Okay.
No, I mean, never say never, but
Okay.
I was a public company CEO for 17 years. I think that's probably at least 4, maybe 5 times the average survival period. And now it's more about trying to use some of my experience to the benefit of, in this case, the CEO in first line and her management team, and really nurturing something, because people realize that I really love new products, and especially what new products can do to benefit patients. And that gets me really going. And people always feel that. They see, even in the big company boardrooms, they can see my eyes light up and probably my blood pressure go up in a good way, because I get passionate about an idea that can be brought to fruition, even if, it's, sometimes a pathway strewn with obstacles and sometimes short-term failures that need to be fixed. And once you've done this in many, many different fields, whether it's consumer goods, was where I started, med device or pharmaceuticals, and industrials now as well, I've seen a lot of things, and you can use knowledge and instinct to a benefit.
Did you get that at Allergan as well? We can talk about commitments to R&D and percentage of this and that demonstrates a love of research and development. But did you have times where you learned about some nascent project that just was emerging and really caught your fancy, and you kind of followed it to maturation into the commercial market?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose the most famous one, I have to lay all credit at the door of our founder, who also received an award today,
you talked with him
Gavin
earlier.
Herbert. And, it's wonderful that he bought a little product called Oculinum, which then its brand name was Botox, from an ophthalmologist in San Francisco, Alan Scott. And I think I remember the number of $28 million, which seemed like a lot of money at the time, for what he thought was a service product, really almost doing the ophthalmic community a favor, because of the first indication was strabismus. And in those days, there was no such thing as orphan drug pricing for rare diseases. So started as like a rare disease product, very small. It was still less than $100 million when I arrived in 1998. And when I left, it was $2.2 billion.
Unbelievable.
And based on what I'd read from the new company, the new Allergan, headed rapidly to the $3 billion mark.
With many new applications, many applications.
Many different non-ophthalmic indications. And just to make the point, as proud as we were about wrinkles, over half of the indications aren't aesthetic, very serious therapeutic benefits.
But you also, in addition to the love of R&D, and maybe perhaps because of the love of R&D, you took a very, I guess, careful look at overhead when you took Allergan over, and you made some really difficult decisions that I'm sure were tough for you and tough for some at the company. What was that process like, taking that over and seeing in your mind? I think I read that you initially wanted to trim by 33%, and that first year you trimmed by 22%. I mean, that that takes some gumption to go in there and really dive in head first.
Well, looking back, I had some ample time in 1997 because working for a Swiss or a German company, they don't let you leave so quickly. From a legal point of view, I had a year's contract, a year's notice. Now, I managed to, in a polite manner, negotiate that down to a couple of months. So I had a lot of time for homework. And the first two insights were lack of focus, which I can now joke is not good for an ophthalmic company. We should be very focused. And secondly, kind of inward looking and lots of management layers. So the first two things I did, and I reversed the order because I saw the bureaucracy part first. I changed the order. I went to really going back to Gavin Herbert's strategy of do a few things very, very well. And secondly, I embarked on just what you said. And a lot of people, when we actually got to 22% reduction in overhead headcount, they thought I was doing this because I was preparing the company for sale, or I was just trying to pump up the earnings per share for my own personal benefit, whatever. And then were surprised when very quickly I turned around and put almost all of the savings, first of all, into Salesforce, because I wanted to get the message back to the customer. They come first, not us internally. Once I knew things were really on the up and up, i.e. long cycle success, then we really started pumping money back into R&D. And when people ask me, what were you most proud of? I could have a long list of not things I did, but the team did. Because it's always how do you build a great team around you, not just top management, up and down and across the company. But I think the greatest point of pride was not just supplying Wall Street with results, but moving the R&D budget at the beginning from less than 100 million to over 1 billion 17 years later, which by definition is for the long term. And hence why, the whole debacle we had with Valeant, whose job was to cut R&D, was really abhorrent to me personally, as well as the whole board of directors and the whole Allergan team.
That's a great segue, because I did want to talk about that. And your point is, you were obviously worked hard against that deal. Was there any part of you? I mean, it's one thing to, I guess, resist a deal to maintain your own independence, but this was definitely more than that. This was definitely a clash of cultures. And was there any part of you that was interested in letting that deal happen, or you were 100% against it for the reasons you just stated?
Well, first of all, any public company CEO and board reports to the shareholder base. So we have to think about value. And on each occasion where Valeant, because they upped the bid 3 times, they were never anywhere close to the intrinsic value of the company. In fact, I can say, not based on our own analysis, that of the experts, of bankers who do that for a living every day, they were trying to steal the company. And that was an absolute no. But beyond that, how they wanted to create value was abhorrent. First of all, they wanted to cut the R&D budget by close to 90%. So they'd have taken it almost all the way back to the beginning again, probably $200+ million, running a revenue base of 7 billion. And secondly, tax stripping. Now, those are the laws of the land. We've seen other companies doing tax stripping, and in this case, Valeant would have reduced the tax bill by $500 million. All of those things were pretty unpalatable to us on the board of directors.
And you made some presentations that I think have been identified as being quite prescient as the strategy that Valeant was following, that it wasn't a sustainable one. And I think time has borne that out. Are you surprised?
Yes, yeah, I mean, it's all in the public domain. The first public presentation, which was filed with the SEC, was in May of 2014. We liken them to Tyco, and we know what happened with Tyco, that they finally got broken up into lots of constituent parts. At the time, people used to say, are you calling them Enron? And I said at that time, I have no proof of any wrongdoing. Of course, other things have occurred since. where one could have a different opinion. How like are they or unlike to Enron? And we also pointed out exorbitant price increases, and of course that has all come full circle, with the Valeant CEO testifying in front of Congress a couple of months before his own demise of being fired as CEO.
Mm-hmm. So did that story, was that a happy ending for you, having Actavis come in and take over, or was your mindset on remaining independent and leading Allergan for another set number of years?
Well, I mean, first of all, our goal, which we'd followed for years, was to be a vibrant, independent company.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at a certain point, you have to say, what is the best answer for the shareholders? And in this case, my job was to get a price that matched what we thought was our intrinsic value. And we created a lot of value in a very short period of time. When Valeant, unbeknown to us, Ackman was acquiring our shares, the company was worth somewhere around $30 billion. When we closed the deal with Actavis, the headline number was $66 billion. And when it actually closed, post regulatory approvals by the US and European competition authorities, the deal was $71 billion. So you can say, a year's work, $41 billion, nobody can really complain. But I think now to answer the more important part for the ophthalmic community, I knew Brent Saunders from his time of being CEO at Bausch & Lomb.
Mm-hmm.
We actually served on the advisory board to the foundation of the American Academy of Ophthalmology, so very close to home. Got to know the person. He's a good executive. He's a good human being. And when we really got talking about, what would Allergan within the then Actavis look like,
Mm-hmm.
I was comfortable that he and his team, combined with our team, would be good stewards of our assets and continue to serve for the long term the needs of ophthalmologists and their patients, our patients.
Was the name change part of that negotiation, or did that come later?
No, at some point he said to me, I really like the Allergan name. It stands for so much. I said, look, if you buy the company, you own the brand name. You can do what you wish with it. Obviously, privately and later on, I had to be very pleased because at that time, everybody had difficulties pronouncing Actavis. In Europe, they actually call it Actavis or Actavis. And when Brent and I went on TV, I said, Brent, would you kindly repeat exactly how you wish Actavis to be pronounced? So I got it right. And later on I could joke and say, finally I found an activist I really liked, who liked us so much it then became the new Allergan.
Great. And finally, you opened this up by talking about Bionez, and you made a point of saying that this is a company that's not in the ophthalmology space.
Yeah.
You still have some loyalty to Allergan? You don't want to create something in the ophthalmology space? Is that what's driving you?
Yeah, I mean, certainly for, I've been away from the old Allergan now for, a year and a half. I've been offered all sorts of things, but the idea of competing with my old team didn't appeal to me. And so really all my work is in philanthropy. Even when I was CEO, I was involved in most of the ophthalmic charities. Now I can dedicate more time to that. I suppose my primary role is president of the International Council Ophthalmology Foundation. I suppose I'm the fundraiser, so if any of you CEOs are watching and you're profitable, I could be looking for you. But it's for a good cause. Basically, education of physicians, particularly in emerging markets, and it's called Teach the Teachers program. Then privately, I have a passion to continue my long history now in eye care. And by pure chance, my younger brother is an ophthalmologist in Scotland who also dedicated a large part of his life to charity. He was 12 years in Ghana, working in the Palestinian hospital in Jerusalem, and then built the first eye care hospital in Cambodia, working for CBM. So luckily, I did rather well financially, given what occurred at Allergan. When I started, the company was worth $2 billion. As you heard earlier in the interview, we closed at 71 billion, and I'm going to build a hospital, at least one, somewhere in Africa. And I'm collecting more and more data on how to do that and what things to avoid. And again, any of you who are listening, who, when we announce this, would like to participate, we need your money would be fine, but we need your brains and we need your expertise.
We'll be happy to put a link in the in this interview so people can track it down. And one final thing, I think you're also missing an author, right? You're authoring a book about your experience.
Yes, the book is coming along. Really, it's a story about innovation, but then also basically what happened at the end. You know, this momentous battle for 7.5 months. I think it's fascinating just to read about the intricacies of it, what happened to Allergan, but there's a lot of societal learnings as well in terms of what happens when capitalism goes out of control. And a lot of the things we're seeing politically in the world is really a reflection of that, and not just limited to the United States. You can see it in the UK, you can see it in France and Germany, Austria, many of the countries I have lived in. So I think there's some deep learnings here. I think for now the book is going to be called Barbarians at Fort Botox.
We'll be looking for that on the bookshelves. David Pyott, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.